Thank you, Ed. For more on all this, let's bring in KT McFarland now. She's the former Deputy National Security Advisor for the President. We are talking about your boss and his case, KT. Good morning. First to the news that the judge, Sullivan, has decided to open this up to hear from third parties, an unusual step, before ultimately making a decision on this case. What's your reaction to that, KT?
Well, Sandra, I'm not a lawyer, so I really can't speak to the legal ins and outs of the case against General Flynn. All I can say is that he was treated the same way I was treated, which is ambushed by the FBI, tried to trick us into committing crimes that we had no intention of committing, tried to charge us with perjury crimes. And in Flynn's case, they tried to use his son as blackmail against him to plead guilty for a crime he didn't commit. I just wish the best for General Flynn and for his family, and I sure hope they can move on soon and get on with their lives.
You have said you believe that he was framed, KT. Why?
Well, it's for the same reason that the approach was the same with me, where they come unannounced, in his case to the White House, in my case to my house. And when they arrive, they didn't warn me about anything, but the first thing out of my mouth was, do I need a lawyer for anything? Am I under some kind of investigation? And they said, oh, well, we can't tell you not to get a lawyer, but we're here just to get some information about what the Russians might have done. Well, Sandra, I'm a Girl Scout, and I wanted to know what the Russians did during the election as much as anybody else. I wanted to prevent the Russians or anybody else from interfering in our elections going forward. In General Flynn's case, they did the same thing. They lulled him into thinking, well, you're not a subject, you're not somebody under investigation. The whole time, they were targeting him, they were targeting me, and they were really targeting President Trump. Because for a couple of reasons. One, they wanted to bring the Trump administration to its knees before it even got started. Number two, they wanted to protect whatever lies it now turns out they were saying, and I'm saying with this regard, the intelligence community writ large. And third, they didn't want to have the new administration see what they had done during the previous administration. And they didn't want the new administration to reorganize the intelligence community, which was our intention from the very beginning. So they set Flynn up, they set me up, they set other people up, but the real goal for them was to go after President Trump. We were collateral damage. They didn't care whose lives they ruined. They wanted to go after President Trump.
KT, you've come to all these conclusions yourself after digging through all those documents, reading through all 53 of those interviews, those individual quotes that were provided that you were able to read, and your conclusion has been, as you just stated, that you and Michael Flynn were set up from the very beginning. What did you see in those interviews, in those documents, that led you to that conclusion?
A couple of things. One of the documents that was released said that President Obama, Vice President Biden, Susan Rice, senior officials of the intelligence community and the FBI discussed this on January 5th. They discussed the topic of General Flynn. And President Obama, according to these notes, apparently said, well, is there any reason we shouldn't let General Flynn and the incoming administration know about our relations with the Russians? Now, that was January 5th. I know from 2 weeks prior to that when General Flynn and I met with Susan Rice in her office in the West Wing, an office that was about to become General Flynn's office, that she was already withholding any information about the Russians. In fact, one of the things I said to General Flynn after the Russian sanctions went on, I said, we met with them in the West Wing office where we're supposed to go through, here's what the state of play with all of the nations. So here's what's going on in the Middle East, here's what's going on in the fight against ISIS, here's what's going on with China. It's to pass from one administration into the next. The one glaring exception that she never discussed was Russia. So they knew from the beginning that they were setting this all up. They were not going to let us know in advance what they were planning. And yet you knew that they knew about the Russian interference with the election. They knew about it months before. But yet they wanted to withhold that to the very end. And I think that was part of the whole setup.
Okay, so that's the conclusion you've come to based on all of that. You have ultimately said, KT, your biggest question is who knew what and when did they know it? You have suggested names like Susan Rice, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and others. Who do you believe has the answers to those questions?
Well, I think time will come when this will all become public knowledge, because people kept notes. Documents are coming out now, not only in the testimonies that were before the House Intelligence Committee that were now just released, but also in the charges against Flynn and others. I mean, I looked at what the House Intelligence Committee hearings were, and I did go through those documents. So you had Comey, McCabe, Brennan, Susan Rice, others were testifying that there was no evidence of collusion. There was nothing they found. No collusion between President-elect Trump and the Russians, no collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. They knew from the get-go, from the very beginning, there was nothing there. Even Deputy FBI Director McCabe, he and others implied that while they knew the Steele dossier, in which a lot of the Russia investigation was based, they knew that they had no questions about it. They didn't think it was a legitimate thing, and yet they all went ahead. And they all went ahead with an investigation, and particularly in using the media. Chairman Schiff went to the media and he implied that he had secret information that Donald Trump and his administration and his campaign were colluding with the Russians. Brennan even had the audacity to refer to President Trump as potentially a Russian asset. I mean, these people knew that they had a lie, but they perpetuated it for 3 years. It tore the country apart. And why did they do it? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. What was so important to them that they were willing to perpetrate this hoax on the American people and with their willing allies in the press? Were they trying to cover something up? I don't know, but I sure would like to find out. And I can tell you, President Trump has reassured me several times that this is not going to go away, that he's determined to find out what really happened and went on and to hold people accountable.
When you go to those at the highest levels of the government, members of Congress, Adam Schiff and others, and the certainty with which they stated that there was evidence of collusion with Russia. This is the Wall Street Journal editorial board this morning. I'll get your reaction with the minute or so that we have left here. All the Adam Schiff transcripts, KT, it reads, President Trump often spreads falsehoods, and this is a quote, and invents facts, but at least he paid a price for it in media criticism and public mistrust. An industry of media fact checkers is dedicated to parsing his every word. As for Mr. Schiff, no one should ever believe another word he says. What would you say about that this morning, KT?
I couldn't agree more. And these are people, we gave a lot of these people enormous power, especially after September 11th, to investigate, to look for terrorists, to protect the American people, but they abused that power. They were, who knows who they were listening to. In fact, even that phone call that General Flynn had with the Russian ambassador, guess who knows what was in there? I don't know what was in there. I never saw a transcript. I doubt if General Flynn has seen a transcript. Guess who has seen a transcript or had a transcript read to them? Washington Post reporters. So tell me how that here's the thing that gets me. Hitler's chief propagandist, Goebbels, said, if you tell a big enough lie and repeat it often enough, people will believe it. I think that's what this is. They were telling lies from the get-go, and from the beginning, they knew they were lies, and yet they persisted. My big question is why, and who was in on it, and what did they know, and when did they know it? Whether that's Susan Rice, or FBI Director Comey, or Vice President Biden, or even President Obama. I'm not accusing them, but I think that it's time for the American people to know what was going on and why it was going on and how high up it went.
KT McFarland, great to have you on this morning. Thanks so much.